You got to hold on to that beautiful thing in life called hope. That there's a chance. We're not mathematically eliminated. There's a lot to play for.
Possible because it's tough. It's hard as. If Michael Jordan was on his team, he wouldn't be happy, so...
I don't know how, but the New York Jets just keep getting worse. And to be honest, this is a team that I really consider to be a major Super Bowl contender this year. But so far, they've been anything but. And like anything to do with Aaron Rodgers, whenever there's a small problem, he's just excellent at pouring gasoline all over the problem and making it significantly worse. So before we get to the content, we are less than 30,000 subscribers away from 1 million subscribers. So make sure you subscribe and turn on our notifications to help us get there. And now that we get all that out of the way, break! So Stephon Diggs is out for the season, and the Houston Texans were without Nico Collins on Sunday Night Football when they faced off against the Detroit Lions, which meant that Tank Dell was going to see more targets. The problem? I had no idea who the Texans wide receiver 2 was going to be, which made it very difficult to project receiving yards at the very beginning of the game. Now, as Sunday Night Football started, we saw John Mechie explode for over 65 receiving yards in the beginning, so at halftime, I decided to take advantage of this. I went on Prize Picks to check his live projection and saw that he only needed 6 more receiving yards in the second half for his square to hit. And based off of the flow of the game, you didn't need to be a genius to know this was going to work. So I also saw that David Montgomery only needed 15 more rush yards in the second half for his square to hit. So I decided to test the waters with my first live pick and made an easy $60. Now, if you want to take advantage of this brand new feature, make sure you download Prize Picks and use my promo code Mikerophone to get a free $50 when you make a play of $5 or more. And if you followed me on Instagram, you would have seen this projection on my story. But since it's a live projection, I highly recommend turning on my story notification so you get them immediately. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I feel a lot of empathy for New York Jets fans, primarily because this team has never had more hope than going into last season when they traded for Aaron Rodgers. There was a lot of problems and a lot of holes on that team, don't get me wrong. The offensive line wasn't necessarily the greatest. The wide receiver core wasn't nearly as deep as it is now, but they had some very promising pieces offensively and defensively, and they had one of the best defensive minds in the NFL coaching them. But alas, we know what would happen that season. In Aaron Rodgers' very first series with the New York Jets, he would tear his Achilles, and this changed the lives of many people for a very long time. Zach Wilson went from a player that had the opportunity to redshirt for a season to a player that was thrust into the spotlight once again. And although he had a promising game against the Kansas City Chiefs that year, it was more of the same. Aaron Rodgers still somehow found a revolutionary way to make the whole season about himself, creating this narrative that he was going to try to return from this injury in about 3 months' time. When time came for him to play again, there really wasn't a point because the Jets were mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. So going into the offseason, it was very clear what the New York Jets needed to do. They needed to bolster the offensive line and get a much more dependable backup quarterback. And they did all of that and then some. They traded for Morgan Moses, they signed John Simpson, they added Javon Kinlaw, they traded for Hassan Reddick, they signed Tyron Smith, they signed Mike Williams. All of these are very solid players, some with a decent injury history, but they also drafted an offensive tackle in the first round, Ali Fashanu. I honestly thought that the New York Jets had a very good offseason, but of course there was a lot of strangeness in this offseason. In June of 2024, Aaron Rodgers missed mandatory minicamp just so he could take a trip to Egypt. He planned this trip while recovering from a torn Achilles, and he thought originally this would come after the offseason program. He also talked to Robert Saleh, who wanted him at minicamp, but also understood the importance of this trip. Do you understand how bizarre that sounds? You're the starting quarterback for the New York Jets. They went all in on trying to build a Super Bowl contender around you. You clearly need to establish chemistry with Mike Williams and Garrett Wilson, yet you're taking a trip to Egypt. And I want you guys to know, I have a lot of love and respect for Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, but I by no means am a Tom Brady stan. I don't go out of my way to prove Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time, but there are specific things that he's done that make it very evident why he was so successful in his career, whether it was taking pay cuts with the New England Patriots or the way he handled his transition to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And when Tom Brady signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he was very vigilant on getting his new teammates together with him and trying to build a rapport as quickly as possible. Mind you, this is while the COVID pandemic was happening, but every single day, Tom Brady would get to work with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Rob Gronkowski and made sure that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would be prepared come time for the regular season. And even in the very beginning, the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers got off to a rough start. The main point of this being that whenever you're a quarterback that is going to a brand new football team, you need to take the time to build some chemistry with your new teammates, especially the quarterback position. Now, this would be the beginning of a very major problem for the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers. You see, 5 games into the season, following a loss to the Minnesota Vikings, New York Jets decided to fire their head coach, Robert Saleh. This is despite him doing his job really well, in my opinion. Yes, they weren't winning a lot of games, but the original strategy was Aaron Rodgers and company, meaning Aaron Rodgers, Nathaniel Hackett, and Todd Downing, were supposed to handle the offense, whereas Robert Saleh was to make sure that the New York Jets had one of the best defenses in the NFL. And alas, Aaron Rodgers didn't really hold up his part of the bargain, and he consistently pointed the blame finger at others. And I guess the first victim in this entire saga was Robert Saleh, because despite the Jets having one of the best defenses in the entire NFL, he was fired. Throughout the Saleh era, he had to make it work with Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, who wasn't giving him the same effort in return. How can you make it work with a player that doesn't even want to show up to mandatory minicamp? So ownership thought that Saleh was the issue, and they decided to elevate defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich to the head coaching position. But they would lose their very next game, this time to the Buffalo Bills. And in this particular game, Aaron Rodgers had an opportunity to win the game with 2 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. The Jets were down by 3. He targeted Mike Williams on a deep pass to the right, and according to Aaron Rodgers, there was a miscommunication between the two.
Two verticals, Allen's down the seam, Mike's down the red line. So I'm looking at Allen. He puts his hand up. 3 guys go with him. So I'm throwing a no look to the red line. And when I just peek my eyes back there, he's running an inbreaker. So it's got to be down the red line.
So it was Mike Williams' fault that the New York Jets weren't able to win. Mind you, this is their 6th game together, and they're talking about an individual that missed mandatory training camp and a wide receiver that's brand new to the team. It's like chemistry needs to be built somehow. So eventually the Jets would go out and trade for Davante Adams, making one of the best wide receiver cores in the entire NFL with Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams. And I don't think this was a good trade because now Aaron Rodgers has more people enabling him. I mean, the Jets would get decimated against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Davante Adams would rip his new teammates.
A lot of these guys in here haven't been anywhere else where they've won and, have had that urgency that it takes in order to be a good team. So, this team being so talented on the, roster-wise, it's just a waste to have everybody out there and, to have a dead sideline like that. Brees catch a ball and go 60, and we can't feed off none of the energy, and those type of plays are supposed to be contagious for the rest of the team. So
it's just hysterical because Aaron Rodgers is consistently making all these moves, yet he says things like this.
It's interesting the amount of power that people think that I have, which I don't.
But it's okay because following this game, the Jets get to face off against a very easy opponent. The New England Patriots are a layup. They're closer to the #1 overall pick than any chance of potentially making it into the playoffs. And the Jets would lose to the Patriots.
Yeah, I've been in the darkness. You got to go in there, make peace with it.
All Aaron Rodgers can do at this point is try to come off as a fake philosopher and make allusions to the fact that he had a darkness retreat a year ago. Now, the Jets would get back on track. They would defeat the Houston Texans 13-21, despite the Texans dealing with a ton of injuries. So that gave fans a lot of hope. They also had a 10-day intermission in between these games. So it gave the Jets an opportunity to try to build some chemistry with their roster. And that didn't work at all. I'm sorry, it just didn't. I mean, between During this period of time, they traded Mike Williams to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Williams had a remarkable debut with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, he only made one reception, but that one reception was for 32 yards and a touchdown. Following that game, he threw some shade at his former team with the hashtag Redline, so he threw a stray at Aaron Rodgers, and in my opinion, he certainly deserved that stray. I'm honestly really happy for Mike Williams. I mean, it's so nice to see players that are clearly being mismanaged go into new situations and actually having their talents fostered. I mean, Russell Wilson was given up on by Sean Payton, and now he's having a resurgent year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hell, even Justin Fields is having a great year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is before we talk about players like Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield. It's just really nice to see players getting out of bad situations and into good situations, getting their confidence built up, and actually saving their careers as a result of it. It's one of my favorite themes of this season. So if you watch the game versus the Arizona Cardinals, I mean, it went from really bad to way worse for the New York Jets. The Jets lost 31-6, but that's not even the worst part of this. If you just watched this game, I mean, Aaron Rodgers fumbled in the red zone. Devontae Adams would continue kissing his calling him Michael Jordan.
Possible because it's tough. I mean, it's hard as, I mean, if Michael Jordan was on this team, he wouldn't be happy. So, you know, you can look at it however you want with that. But, yeah, you're not supposed to be happy when things aren't going great, but you do have to try to dig deep and find a way to fix it, and that's what we're trying to do now.
Following the game, Aaron Rodgers would talk about how inconsistent the team is.
You know, we aren't winning consistently enough, I don't think, week to week. We've had good games, good halves, bad games. The game's different, so it's on us, you know, to fix it, obviously. But you're not going to fix it by doing the same thing you did.
And then mention that he still has hope. Now, what do I mean by hope? The team technically isn't mathematically eliminated from the playoffs yet, but they need to win out the rest of their games in order to get to the playoffs. Now, could they do it? I mean, we've seen second half resurgences before, but I feel like this is the team that just shoots itself so often and so consistently. If you take a look at the rest of their schedule, it's a very winnable schedule. I mean, they have the Indianapolis Colts coming up next, then they have a bye week in between, and then they take on the Seattle Seahawks, who are currently on a 2-game losing streak, before facing off against their division rival Miami Dolphins, who have had a tough year this year as well, but that was primarily due to Tua's injury. Then they face off against the worst team in the NFL in the Jacksonville Jaguars, then the LA Rams. Then they have 2 huge division games against the Bills and against the Dolphins to finish out the year. Throughout all this, they can't lose more than 1 game, so they have to lock in right now. They theoretically could win out the rest of the season, but I just never have seen a season like this succeed. You know, maybe the only time I've seen any type of success in a season like this was with the Las Vegas Raiders during the 2021 season when John Gruden stepped down and Henry Ruggs decided to ruin multiple lives, including his own, and then Rich Bisaccia took over and Derek Carr had a career year, but the circumstances there were significantly different because those were circumstances that were beyond the Raiders' control. I'm not saying that it was out of Henry Ruggs' control to do that horrific thing, but in terms of the organization, it's not like this was a team that was shooting itself in the foot. In the case of the New York Jets, they're just making poor decision after poor decision, and they're not giving themselves an opportunity to build team chemistry with one another. Because on paper, I feel like this could be a team that wins a Super Bowl, but since Aaron Rodgers likes to deflect blame and point the blame finger at everyone else but himself, and plus the fact that he's just not playing good football currently. I mean, it's currently the worst football of his career, 62% completion percentage and an 86.8 quarterback rating, which would make it for the worst quarterback rating of his entire career as a full-time starter. I mean, this is all on him currently. It's 100% on him. The New York Jets did their job. They bolstered the offensive line. They got Aaron Rodgers every player that he would want. There's a lot of familiarity in the offense. I think the biggest mistake of the season was firing Robert Saleh, and you should have kept him if you decided that you wanted to start the season with him. I don't know how much of an upgrade the interim head coach Jeff Ulbrich is, but we'll have to see, man. The Jets really could only lose one more game if they want to make it into the playoffs. I personally don't think they can do it, but if you're a Jets fan, let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.